Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 6:15. When Responsibility Turns Dangerous. Before Ethan even opened his eyes, he caught a faint, elegant fragrance in the air. It was refined and floral, the kind of scent that felt clean and calming, almost like it could wash the fog out of his mind. He inhaled deeply once, twice, and his head cleared a little more. Then he froze. Something soft was pressing against his arm. He shifted slightly, his other hand moving to check what it was. What he felt was warm, smooth, and incredibly soft, too soft. His fingers brushed over a gentle curve, and his body went rigid. This is? His heart jumped to his throat. Every nerve in his body snapped awake, and a cold jolt ran down his spine. He turned his head, and his blood nearly stopped flowing. There, resting against his arm, was a woman. Her face was right in front of his, lips slightly parted, breathing slow and steady. A faint blush colored her cheeks, and each breath she exhaled brushed lightly against his neck. Amber. Zane. Ethan didn't dare move. Every muscle in his body locked up as if he were facing a live bomb. He could see her eyelashes tremble slightly, like she might wake at any second. He slowly turned his gaze to the ceiling, mind spinning. What the hell happened? He was supposed to be immune to poisons. How did this even happen? Most men would call this a blessing. A stunning woman asleep beside them, close enough to touch. But for Ethan, it was like waking up next to a ticking explosive. Amber Zane. The last time they met, she had disguised herself as a man in the Silverwood Hidden Territory, and Ethan had honestly thought Dominic Zane was just some delicate-looking boy. Now, seeing her as she truly was, there was no mistaking it. Her beauty was impossible to overlook, her figure elegant and confident. But attraction wasn't even on his mind. For reasons he couldn't quite explain, Ethan had always felt she was more of a rival than anything else. So lying here now, with her pressed close, was a nightmare dressed up as a fantasy. His body was rigid, his thoughts in chaos, sweat beading on his forehead. It's over, he thought miserably. I'm screwed. The man who'd faced cosmic storms and life-or-death battles without blinking now found himself on the verge of panic. He wanted to cry and laugh at the same time. Then an idea flickered to life. Wait. Maybe if I just pretend to be unconscious. He closed his eyes and furrowed his brow, trying to look like he'd passed out from the night before. If she thought he didn't remember anything, maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't lose her mind when she woke. His mind drifted briefly to the hazy dream he'd had earlier. It was confusing, full of flashes and sensations that made no sense. Felt like something had happened. And yet, maybe nothing had. He sighed inwardly. Whatever it was, he had a bad feeling he'd gotten the short end of it. A faint sound interrupted his thoughts. Amber stirred beside him, letting out a soft noise, almost a sigh. Her head lifted from his arm, and his entire body tensed again. He counted silently in his head. 1 second, 2, 10, 15. Each tick of time stretched endlessly. Then, the mattress shifted. He could feel the weight leave his side. He exhaled quietly. Maybe she'd realized the situation and decided to handle it calmly. Maybe she even understood that they'd both been victims of whatever had happened last night. But before he could finish that thought, warmth pressed against him again. Sudden, close, and unmistakably real. His eyes flew open in shock, just as their bodies made contact. You! Ethan's voice caught halfway between panic and disbelief. Amber's gaze met his. Her eyes, still tinged with a faint pink hue, told him what he didn't want to believe. The poison in her system wasn't fully gone. You're awake, she said, her voice soft and strained. She looked as startled as he felt, her expression flickering between pain and confusion. Amber's expression flickered for a moment, then cooled into the calm, aloof look she always wore. Don't worry, she said evenly. I'll take responsibility for you. Ethan almost choked. Of all the things she could have said, that was the last he expected. Take responsibility? For him? Pain and disbelief flashed through him, quickly replaced by a rush of irritation. Take responsibility? My ass. At that point, no man would have stayed still. Her words struck something primal in him, lighting a spark of defiance deep in his chest. His hands caught her wrists. With a surge from his waist, he pushed up, reversing their positions in one fluid motion. Ah! Amber gasped softly. Ethan hovered above her, his eyes sharp and unyielding, a trace of grim satisfaction playing at the corner of his mouth. In that moment, his gaze carried the weight of someone looking down upon the world. Amber's eyes trembled. The shock in them wasn't only fear, it was recognition. She had been conscious before, at least partly. Even in her poisoned haze, she remembered what had happened, what she had done. She had taken the initiative, and every time she had lost control. Now, as she met Ethan's gaze, her thoughts scattered again, her mind tumbling into confusion. Whatever resistance she might have had dissolved into the haze left behind by the venom still lingering in her veins. At the bow of the flying dragon, two figures stood beneath the night sky, one plump, one thin. "We're almost there, right?" the fat man asked, his voice muffled by the wind. "Just about. We'll reach the dock by dawn," replied the thinner one, glancing at his watch. The glowing digits read 1 a.m. "So it's been, what, 3 days now?" "Exactly 72 hours. The thin man answered in his usual flat tone. The fat man hesitated, scratching his neck. "You think anyone's dead in there?" "Probably not. Alan Voss said the lust serpent's core can be absorbed directly." The thin man said, eyes fixed on the horizon. "But if it passes through a woman's body as a catalyst, then the mist she exhales makes the effect 10 times stronger." He was Emery Shaw, and despite his calm voice, his gaze was uneasy, drifting into the dark stretch of sky ahead. "I wasn't talking about that," the fat man grumbled. "I meant the woman. I've had her soul sealed for almost 3 days. No food, no water. Think she's starved to death." Emery sighed. "Then why don't you just check with your soul sense?" "Soul sense, my ass," the fat man muttered, rubbing his temples. His name was Varric Stone, though he hated anyone using his full name. Emery had learned that over the past 2 days and just called him Fatso. Fatso winced at the memory. A day earlier, curiosity had gotten the better of him. He'd used his soul power to peek into the room where Ethan and Amber were. He never made that mistake twice. The instant his soul sense brushed against that place, a terrifying force struck back, shattering his perception and nearly tearing apart his mindscape. Even now, his head throbbed faintly at the thought. For the past 2 days, he hadn't dared to use his soul power at all. He didn't even think about it. Whatever had struck him wasn't normal. It wasn't Ethan's doing either, or at least it shouldn't have been. Sure, Ethan was a soul wielder, but there was no way his strength reached that level. If Ethan could have heard Fatso's thoughts, he would have been just as baffled. He had been unconscious the whole time. When had he ever launched a soul counterattack? Of course, that power hadn't come from him. It belonged to Morzan, the entity who had sealed Ethan's consciousness earlier and left behind a remnant of his soul power to guard the room. Even the little fragments of consciousness that lived in Ethan's mind had been cut off completely by Morzan's barrier. Chapter 616. Reason for Resentment. The ship's horn blared, a long, resonant note that rolled across the harbor. The flying dragon was making its final approach. Dawn light spilled over the sea as the massive cruise ship glided toward the port. Passengers crowded along the railings, cheering and waving, their excitement a mix of relief and disbelief that the journey was finally coming to an end. Ethan, however, could only stare, his expression somewhere between helplessness and exhaustion. He glanced toward the bed, where Amber Zane lay fast asleep. Her breathing was soft and even, her face calm, though faint streaks of dried tears still clung to her lashes. And him? Why was it so damn hard to catch a break? He thought, rubbing his temples. What the hell just happened? After a night of what could only be called chaos, he felt no fatigue at all. In fact, it was Amber who had reached her limit, more than once, drifting between moments of wakefulness and unconsciousness. And him? He was still, well. He gave a crooked smile and let out a quiet sigh. Forget it. He swung his legs off the bed and took in the wreckage around him. Their clothes lay scattered across the floor in torn, useless pieces. With a flicker of thought, he summoned a fresh set from his mindscape and began dressing. When he looked back at the bed, a single crimson mark stained the sheets. For a moment, he simply stared at it, his expression unreadable. Then he shook his head. It was done. There was nothing more to say. He pulled the blanket up to cover Amber's bare shoulders, tucking her in gently before turning away. His soul sense spread outward in a silent wave, sweeping across the entire ship in an instant. On the deck, 2 men, one broad and heavy-set, the other lean and sharp-eyed, stiffened at the same time. Their gazes met, and in that brief look was shared resignation. "It's finally over," one muttered. They had just received Ethan's mental message, instructing them to come over immediately. As they turned to leave, another pulse of thought reached them. Bring food. A short pause. A lot of it. Back in the suite, Ethan dropped onto the living room sofa and lit a cigarette. The smoke curled lazily toward the ceiling as his stomach growled in protest. He felt like he could devour an entire cow. Then his eyes drifted to the far corner of the room. A woman was lying there, motionless. He blinked. She'd been there since. When? A bitter smile touched his lips. That had to be the fatty's work. The structure of the ward was complex, far beyond what he expected. For a moment, he wasn't even sure how to begin unraveling it. Impressive. What's that fatty's story? He thought. I'll have to ask him later. Moments later, Emery Shaw and Varric Stone appeared at his door, arms full of food. Ethan opened it, snatched the bags without a word, and began eating right there. Are we almost there? He asked between bites. We're already entering the port, Emery said. We can disembark any minute. Ethan nodded and chewed faster. What about her? Varric asked, crouching beside the unconscious woman and jerking his chin toward her. What do we do with this one? Undo the ward, Ethan said, still eating. I've got a few questions for her. I think I might know who she is. Before either of them could move, the woman let out a soft groan. Her eyelids fluttered, and she slowly regained consciousness. The first thing she saw was Varric's large face hovering right in front of hers. Ah! She screamed, voice shrill and panicked. Varric jerked back, muttering under his breath, Shit! And stepped aside. The woman, Quinn, struggled upright, eyes darting wildly. The moment she spotted Ethan, her whole body froze. Her face went pale as terror gripped her. Ethan, don't kill me, she cried, her voice breaking. It was my godfather. He made me do it. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. Oh, so you do know me. He exhaled slowly, his gaze sharpening. Tell me, then, who are you? Now it was clear. This woman hadn't just been a bystander. She'd been part of the plan to drug Amber. I'm Quinn. Her voice trembled, but her eyes flickered with something sharp when she met Ethan's gaze. He doesn't even remember who I am? The thought struck her like a slap. For an instant, resentment twisted her features before she quickly masked it. But Ethan caught the brief change. Quinn, he repeated, narrowing his eyes. So it really is you. And you hate me? There was genuine confusion in his tone. For a moment, he wondered if Old Man Kane had been nothing more than a scapegoat. Could Quinn, his former employee, have been the real hand behind the scheme? The woman before him was barely recognizable. Her face was buried under layers of makeup, her hair and posture different from how he remembered her. But that look in her eyes, raw, venomous hatred, was unmistakable. Ethan tried to recall what he could. He couldn't think of anything that would have provoked such loathing. He remembered Celia telling him Quinn had resigned. He'd even told Celia to give her a generous severance package. 3 months' salary, tripled. That was 9 months of pay, close to $100,000. Why on earth would she hate him? Quinn lowered her head, realizing from his expression that he had seen the flash of hatred she tried to hide. I don't, she began, then suddenly let out a piercing scream. Her hands clutched her head as she collapsed onto the floor, writhing in pain. That's what you get for lying, Varric said casually, standing off to the side. A strange mist shimmered faintly in his eyes. Ethan turned to him, curiosity mixing with amusement. This guy's sharper than he looks. Heh, please boss, go ahead, Varric said quickly, his tone turning obsequious as the strange light faded from his gaze. Quinn's cries slowly died down. Her body trembled as she knelt on the floor, sweat dripping from her chin, soaking the carpet. Tell me everything, Ethan said quietly. His voice carried an unspoken weight. I, Ethan Selam, give you my word. I won't make things difficult for you. Quinn raised her head, her breathing ragged. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with a feverish light. Ethan. She hissed his name through clenched teeth. You made me the manager of the gym, and then you stripped me of my authority. You humiliated me in front of everyone. Am I not allowed to hate you for that? Her voice rose into a scream, trembling with rage and self-pity. Ethan stared at her, momentarily stunned. That's it? All of this chaos, all of this madness, because of something so petty? He didn't even know how to respond. Across the room, Varric and Emery exchanged glances. They didn't know the full story, but Ethan's reaction said enough. The woman's hatred, her instability, it was absurd. Yes, that's it, Quinn shouted, staggering to her feet. Her hands were balled into fists, her face contorted. I worked myself to the bone for you. I did everything I could to make the gym profitable. Was I wrong for that? I rented out the whole place to Mr. Leon's crew to bring in more money. Was that wrong? Everything I did was for you. And what did I get in return? Her voice cracked. You humiliated me and took it all away. Ethan looked at her, his expression unreadable. He couldn't decide whether to be angry or just pity her. How narrow-minded can a person be? He thought. And I actually trusted her with the gym. He exhaled, his tone quiet but edged with disbelief. Was I the one who was wrong? I only bought that gym for fun. For fun. Quinn laughed bitterly. That's all you rich people ever think about, fun. Ethan's eyes softened for a moment, then cooled again. He shook his head slowly. This woman was lost to her own bitterness. His thoughts drifted briefly to Amber, still asleep in the next room. She had been drugged and nearly destroyed because of all this. He had thought it was a mess that didn't concern him. But now, knowing Quinn's involvement, a flicker of guilt stirred in his chest. Even if I was in the wrong, he said at last, his voice turning cold. You had no right to go after an innocent person. Chapter 6:17, Until She Returns. Quinn laughed as if she had just heard the funniest thing in the world. Innocent? You mean that fallen Zane family steward's daughter? Please, I wanted you dead. She was just collateral damage. But you killed someone, didn't you? Ha ha ha. Just wait until the law comes for you. Her laughter spiraled out of control, harsh and unhinged. She had completely lost it. This woman's beyond saving, boss? Varric muttered from the side. Now that everything was out in the open, he finally understood what this whole mess was about. There was no great feud here, just petty jealousy twisted into madness. He looked to Ethan for a decision. Ethan had heard enough. Her biggest mistake wasn't her jealousy. It was daring to touch the people around him. I said before, Ethan Selim, won't make things difficult for her, he said quietly, leaning back on the sofa. Oh, Varric grunted in acknowledgement. You can go, Emery added from the side, his voice thick with contempt. A woman like this made his skin crawl. Quinn glared at Ethan one last time, then turned toward the door. Just as her hand touched the handle, a violent surge of soul energy struck the back of her skull. Her body jerked as if she'd been electrocuted. Her eyes lost focus, turning glassy and vacant. Ethan said he wouldn't make things difficult for you. He didn't say anything about me, Varric said calmly, his eyes clearing as the mist within them faded. You! Emery shot up, glaring at Varric, who only lifted his multiple chins and looked smugly unbothered. Emery turned toward Ethan. The faint smile tugging at Ethan's lips told him everything. She's just an ordinary woman, Emery sighed. What you did? He stopped mid-sentence and shook his head before sinking back into his seat. Relax. She won't die, Varric said with a small chuckle. I just cut a few neural connections. If you feel sorry for her, send her to a good mental hospital. Emery said nothing. Quinn stood by the door, eyes empty, mind clearly gone. She opened it in a daze and stumbled out, her movements stiff and puppet-like under Varric's control. Outside, she walked straight toward the deck. Suddenly, her body trembled violently. A foul stench filled the air as she lost control of her bladder and collapsed to the floor, giggling like a fool. People nearby recoiled, covering their noses and whispering in disgust. Inside the presidential suite, silence settled over the room. Ethan kept eating and drinking, though his soul sense had followed Quinn and seen everything. His brow furrowed slightly. A flicker of pity crossed his mind, but this was what she'd earned. Still, the food in his mouth suddenly tasted like ash, and a wave of nausea rose in his chest. Then came a soft splash. All three men heard it clearly. None of them were weak, and their senses sharpened instantly. Ethan's eyes flicked toward Varric, who gave him an innocent look that said, "Don't look at me." Ethan hadn't sensed any soul energy from him either. Meet me on deck in a bit," Ethan said awkwardly. Varric and Emery exchanged knowing glances, grinning as they got up and left without a word. When they were gone, Ethan stood and walked to the bedroom door. He hesitated, then raised his hand to knock. The handle turned before he could. The door creaked open, and a cool, refreshing scent mixed with something faintly familiar drifted out, stopping him mid-motion. Amber stood there, wrapped in nothing but a bedsheet. "I don't have any clothes to wear," she said softly. The woman who was usually so cold and distant now looked at him with shy, glimmering eyes. Her face was faintly red, her voice gentle and melodious, so different from the brusque tone she'd used earlier when she said she would take responsibility. Her sudden change left Ethan frozen in place. For a few heartbeats he just stared. Then a quiet surge of pride swelled inside him. Has this woman fallen for me? He wanted to laugh, but he held it in. Amber's gaze stayed fixed on him, calm and warm, as if waiting for him to do something. or say something, to make sense of it all. Ethan snapped back to reality. With a thought, several outfits materialized in his hands. You and Lila are about the same height. These should fit you, he said, offering the clothes to Amber. The moment the words left his mouth, her expression shifted. Her eyes flickered, and her lips pressed into a faint line. She took the clothes quietly, lowering her gaze, then closed the door behind her without a word. Through the narrow gap before it shut, Ethan caught a glimpse of a tear slipping down her cheek. The sight struck him harder than he expected. Lila. Her face flashed in his mind, stirring a tangle of emotions he didn't know how to untangle. What am I supposed to do? A heaviness settled in his chest, pressing the air from his lungs. From inside the bedroom, the sound of running water echoed faintly. Amber was showering. Ethan walked to the window and looked out toward the horizon. The sun was blazing high, its reflection dancing across the rolling waves. Sacred Sea Island was already in sight, its shores alive with color and movement. Crowds lined the beaches, laughter and excitement drifting faintly across the wind. The island itself was a wonder, lush and green, filled with plants he'd never seen before. For a moment, he understood why the dissenters had chosen this place. It was as if the world had forgotten to spoil it. A faint smile tugged at his lips. Maybe one day, when everything settled down, he could bring those dear to him somewhere like this. Find an island, build a home, and live as its lord. The thought didn't sound bad at all. The calm of the sea began to steady his heart. He wasn't sure how much time passed before the soft click of a door reached his ears. The bedroom door had opened slightly, but Amber didn't come out. Ethan hesitated, then walked over and gently pushed it wider. Amber was standing by the bed, dressed in Lila's clothes. The outfit looked almost too youthful for her. She had the poise and grace of a woman, and the cute, pastel outfit didn't match her air at all. Yet somehow the contrast only made her seem more fragile. He stayed silent, watching as she carefully folded the blood-stained bedsheet. Her hands paused over the dark stain, her fingers trembling slightly before she finished folding it into a neat square. She picked up her small purse, frowning when she realized the folded sheet wouldn't fit inside. I can keep it for you if you'd like, Ethan said softly. Amber froze, then slowly turned to look at him. Without another word, he lifted a hand, and the sheet vanished from her grasp. In his mindscape, he set it aside, tucked neatly into a quiet corner. Let's go, Amber said after a moment. Her voice was calm again, her eyes clear. The gloom from before had faded, replaced by something quieter, acceptance. Maybe. Her gaze wasn't filled with love, but it wasn't cold either. Her eyes shimmered faintly, like sunlight rippling on water. Ethan found himself staring. What are you staring at, silly? Let's go. The ship's already docked, she said with a small smile, looping her arm through his. You. Ethan was caught off guard by her sudden warmth. When Lila comes back, you'll be hers. I won't interfere, Amber said softly. But until then, please keep me company. There was a trace of vulnerability in her voice, an unspoken plea that went straight to his chest. Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. Instead, he slipped an arm around her waist. Amber's smile brightened, full of quiet joy, and she leaned into him as they walked toward the door together. Chapter 6:18. The Gathering Storm at Sacred Sea Island. Dark clouds gathered over Crescent Isle. 6 silhouettes hovered at the edge of that storm. Blackie, Micah, Regis, Starfall, Dragonchild, and Uncle Jed. They hung there like a single, tense breath waiting to be released. Ahead of them, on a small rise of rock, stood a man in flowing ancient robes. He carried the kind of calm that does not belong to people who expect trouble. This was Lord Alaric, the so-called master of Ascension Isle. He stared at the 6 of them with a look that mixed surprise and something colder. Who are you people? His eyes seemed to ask. Blackie answered for the group without a word. He shed whatever pretense he had left and took on his true shape. The dark cloud beneath his feet swelled and solidified as if called into being by his will alone. Listen here, punk, Blackie snarled. I am the one who should be asking why you attacked me. The thunder in his voice was more than metaphor. It was a promise. Lord Alaric hesitated for an instant, then ignored the challenge and let his gaze travel over the others, pausing on Regis and Starfall. Is this magical beast perhaps your mount? He asked, the question carrying all the contempt of someone who had already decided his answer. Every face in the group shifted. The casual cruelty of that remark, the idea of Blackie as a beast of burden, an object to be bought or sold, struck like a slap. Blackie's reply was immediate and furious. Screw you and your whole family. You are beasts. Your ancestors for 3 generations were animals. Come here and die. A thunderball burst from his palms, crackling with coiling electric serpents. came like an accusation. Lord Alaric's body blurred, a faint flicker to one side, and the lightning ball slid past him as if it had missed. He made it look easy. The strike carried all the force of the storm and all the lesson of not underestimating illusion. The six exchanged quick, sharp looks. This man was dangerous, stronger than they had expected. If this magical beast has no master, perhaps I could purchase it, Lord Alaric offered, voice smooth as silk. He still did not place them on equal footing. His small smile said he believed the conversation beneath him. He is our companion, not a mount, Micah said, the runic scrolls that orbited him humming as he readied himself. He did not sound as if he expected the remark to settle anything. Lord Alaric's smile turned into something colder. Companion? It is just a lowly beast, he said, as if repeating an obvious fact. Before the argument could run on, Uncle Jed moved. The older man's spear flashed through the air like a thrown planet. Enough talk. Let's take him down. Lord Alaric laughed. Heh, a bunch of brutes. Since that is how you want to play, this young lord will not waste any more time with you. As he spoke, Lord Alaric's figure seemed to dissolve. When Uncle Jed's spear passed through where his torso had been, the robe stayed but the body of the man inside slid apart and vanished. Only arrogant laughter lingered in the air. That beast will become my mount sooner or later. Ha ha ha. The voice faded but the threat did not. Uncle Jed's jaw tightened. He had struck something and found nothing. Stop playing games and show yourself, he barked. Regis, who had been watching closely, shook his head. Do not waste your energy. That was only an avatar. He turned his gaze east as if peering through space. If his true body were here, we would have acted already. This avatar is strange. I detected no link to a main body when it appeared. Starfall, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. I sensed the same thing. It behaves like a completely independent entity. Everyone looked to Starfall. He was the only one among them who came from Earth, and for the moment that fact gave his voice an odd weight. Do not look at me for answers, Starfall said with a shrug that was uncannily like one Ethan might have made. I was sealed in that tomb for nearly 20 years. I have been out of touch with this place longer than any of you have been here. On a tiny island far to the east, one that would be invisible to anyone who did not already know where to look, another figure descended. It was an exact duplicate of Lord Alaric. The double said nothing, it simply folded into the man on Crescent Isle, as if two halves of the same person were rejoining. Lord Alaric set his teacup down with a precise little click. The look in his eyes sharpened, hunger and calculation warring with amusement. Oh, such excitement on Crescent Isle, he murmured to himself. He let the corner of his mouth lift. Hee. The Zane family can wait a few more days. That Chelan-like beast is far more interesting. He touched the rim of the teacup as if feeling the weight of a decision settle in his palm. I must find a way to obtain it. As Lord Alaric muttered to himself, his finger tapped lightly against the table, the rhythm betraying the schemes forming in his mind. Each tap carried quiet malice. He was already plotting his next move against Blackie. When his avatar merged back with his true body on the hidden island, understanding dawned. What had happened on Crescent Isle became clear to him, and to anyone else it would have been unbelievable. His avatar was not a simple projection, it had independent thought and action. Even among experts of the Voidbreaker rank, those who could separate their souls from their flesh, avatars always remained tethered to their master's will. But Lord Alaric had broken that boundary. His avatars moved as if they were people of their own, not mere extensions of him. And the strangest part was what came next. The instant the avatar returned, Lord Alaric's strength surged, his aura growing heavier and more potent, as if he had devoured another version of himself. Of course, Regis and the others on Crescent Isle had no way of knowing that Lord Alaric didn't have just one avatar. He had many. Far away across the ocean, another one was already streaking through the skies at incredible speed, cutting through clouds like a streak of light. It flew with fierce purpose, as though it had locked onto its prey. Damn it! The avatar hissed through gritted teeth. The innate sacred aura has weakened. Amber Zane, you wretched woman. You'll pay for this. And that man, I'll tear him into 1,000 pieces. His eyes were dark with murderous intent. The corners of his mouth twisted as if tasting bile, and his face took on a shade of greenish fury. The air around him trembled from his rage before he accelerated again, vanishing into the horizon. Ethan had just set foot on Sacred Sea Island, blissfully unaware that danger was already hurtling toward him from above. When Emery Shaw and Varric Stone saw Ethan and Amber disembark hand in hand, their reactions were instant and predictable. Ugh, ugh, ugh. I can't stand being fed dog food in public. Varric groaned dramatically, turning his back to them as if the sight might blind him. Emery grimaced, pretending to look elsewhere. Disgusting, he muttered, though his lips curved ever so slightly. Let's move, Ethan said, ignoring their theatrics. The ship had long since docked, and most of the passengers were already off, eager to explore. Only a few stragglers remained, and even the crew had gone ashore for a break. The four of them stood out like they didn't belong there. Hey, why are there two other flying dragons anchored out there? Varric asked, glancing toward the distant waters where two identical luxury ships floated, unmoving. Ethan followed his gaze. Sure enough, two other cruise liners, each bearing the flying dragon emblem, were docked side by side, both eerily quiet. If Varric's guess was right, one of those ships should have been the same vessel Kiara had boarded. After her disappearance, her teacher had contacted Aunt Melody, and the company should have returned to port immediately for investigation. But instead, the ships had pressed on toward this destination, ignoring every protocol. 3 days had passed since the first incident, and yet these ships remained docked, empty and silent. When Ethan's group arrived, he learned something else unsettling. The flying dragon they were on wasn't even the same ship Kiara had taken. Another cruise had departed in between theirs. That meant 3 different groups of tourists had arrived on the island over the past several days, each from a different flying dragon cruise. And now, none of those tourists seemed to have left. Ethan's instincts flared. Something was wrong. Why should we hand over our VR headsets? Someone shouted nearby. The group turned their heads. The noise came from the disembarkation area ahead. A crowd had formed, passengers shouting at uniformed staff. The staff were collecting devices from every tourist, VR headsets, communicators, anything connected to the network. Voices rose in confusion and protest. Chapter 619. The Island That Cut the World Away. One man was clutching a VR headset, arguing heatedly with the officials. Ethan watched as he was shoved aside. We've already explained this. No one is allowed to bring ethereal headsets onto the island. Hand them over voluntarily, or don't blame us if things get rough. The speaker, a man with a neatly trimmed goatee, radiated the unmistakable aura of a mutant. His words sparked a wave of complaints from the tourists. This isn't my first time here. I've never heard of such a rule, shouted a woman from the back. Ethan recognized her, the same woman he'd intimidated earlier at the restaurant with Blue Dragon's might. She had boasted about coming here before with her so-called sugar daddy and attending a sacred blood ritual. Now that you're here, you don't have a choice, the goateed man said, raising his voice. Hand over your headsets willingly. This time, our island is open for a full month, and all facilities are completely free. You're actually getting a great deal. So, don't make us take action. Nobody wants things to get ugly. His words rippled through the crowd, quieting some but agitating others. A month? What do you mean? Protested a man wearing glasses, his expression tight with anxiety. This trip was supposed to be 10 days. I only took 10 days off work. He looked like a modest office worker, standing beside a woman dressed like she belonged on a magazine cover. The two were clearly traveling together. At the mention of a month, the man's face turned pale, but the woman beside him lit up. Stop looking so miserable, you're such a buzzkill, she said, rolling her eyes. Is it really a whole month? Everything on the island is free for that long. Her first words were for her companion the second. She directed toward the goateed official. Miss, I suggest you don't question what I say, the man replied, smiling thinly. Haven't you noticed that none of the previous ships have left? A full month of free vacation on Sacred Sea Island. What luck you have. Then his tone hardened. Of course, the condition is that you must surrender your ethereal headsets. For this entire month, you will not have access to the ethereal world. By now, Ethan's group had reached the back of the line. As he listened to the repeated demands to surrender the headsets, his expression darkened. Could it be? Do you guys have cell service? He asked quietly. Varric and Emery both pulled out their phones. A moment later, they looked up and shook their heads. Looks like Sacred Sea Island wants to cut everyone off from the outside world, Ethan muttered. Why? Varric asked, frowning. Fortress Wars? Ethereal. It's just a game. Why is it causing so much trouble in the supernatural world? Emery narrowed his eyes. Ethan glanced at him. Who are you asking? Isn't this dissenter territory? Emery gave a tight, bitter smile and said nothing. He knew Ethan's tone was mocking. In truth, Ethan was just as curious. In his previous life, he probably hadn't climbed high enough to see the bigger picture, to realize that reality itself was filled with hidden currents and power struggles. He wondered who the dissenters were working with and what orders Director Vaughn, Arthur Finch, had left them. It seemed the dissenters stationed on the island hadn't yet made contact with the outside world. They probably didn't know that within the U.S. borders, their 9th Division, the dissenters no longer had any foothold left to stand on. Ethan remembered what Morzan had told him. Expand your influence in ethereal and gather more resources. But what kind of resources? He still didn't know. Was it currency? Power within the game? Powerful equipment? Or perhaps all of the above? Emery? Ethan said, tilting his head slightly. Shouldn't you report this to them? Emery nodded. Let's keep our distance for now. We'll make contact later. After speaking, he strode a few steps ahead, clearly heading toward the goateed man. What about you? Ethan asked, turning to Varric. Me? I'd love to go my own way, but would you actually let me? Varric said, spreading his hands helplessly. Go ahead, Ethan said with a faint smile. I'll find you for a chat when I have time. Really? Varric's eyes lit up, almost childlike with excitement. Ethan rolled his eyes and ignored him, instead turning his gaze westward, toward the island's interior. From the moment he arrived, he'd sensed a strange aura drifting from that direction. It felt faintly familiar, akin to the power that radiated from Dragonchild. Could there really be a dragon nearby? Though the aura was weak, he could tell it was undoubtedly draconic. Were there still dragons on Earth? The thought stirred a deep curiosity in him. Did you notice something? Amber whispered beside his ear. Nothing much, Ethan replied, slightly startled, though he didn't elaborate. You sent both of them away, and you say it's nothing? If you found something interesting, go check it out. I'll be fine. Amber rarely spoke to him with such softness, but there was an understanding warmth in her tone. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, caught off guard by how perceptive she was. Later, he said after a pause, it's not convenient to move around in broad daylight. He reached out and squeezed her hand, firm and reassuring. Amber met his eyes, her lips curving into a playful, almost tender smile. She was well aware that his stealth abilities made daylight or darkness meaningless. He wasn't delaying for tactical reasons, he was delaying for her. The thought made her heart flutter. But she also knew this man didn't truly belong to her. Their connection had been unexpected, a product of chance and circumstance. Yet somewhere along the way, Ethan had quietly carved out a space in her heart. When had that happened? She wasn't sure. Maybe it was when he'd turned the tide at the Silverwood estate. Or perhaps it was when he'd beaten her. The memory made her cheeks burn. When they reached the checkpoint, Ethan and Amber declared that they weren't carrying anything. The goateed man looked at them with faint surprise. In this age, it was rare to see travelers without ethereal equipment. Among everyone who had arrived on their ship, they were the only ones empty-handed. After stepping onto Sacred Sea Island, Amber suddenly swayed on her feet, nearly stumbling. Are you all right? Ethan asked quickly, reaching for her. She'd been fine earlier. What was wrong now? He wondered if it was some lingering exhaustion from their recent, vigorous days together. But she hadn't shown any of the typical soreness or fatigue he half expected from those movie cliches. I'm fine. Look, they're the same way. Amber pointed ahead. Other passengers were staggering too, adjusting clumsily to solid ground after the voyage. Oh, Ethan nodded, though he couldn't say why her explanation left him faintly amused. Amber giggled, clearly catching his expression. You thought I was worn out, didn't you? I'm a peak sovereign rank fighter, remember? You'll have to do better than that to slow me down. She twirled ahead, laughing as she moved, then looked back with a teasing sparkle in her eyes. Poor Lila's going to have it rough later. Before Ethan could respond, Amber slipped from his grasp, her steps light and graceful as she skipped a few paces ahead. Then she turned, made a playful face at him, and darted forward toward the sunlit road that wound deeper into the island. Chapter 620. The Sacred Blood Assembly. After spending the entire day with Amber, Ethan went from being distracted at first to genuinely enjoying himself later on. In 2 lifetimes, he had never been this relaxed. As dusk settled, the setting sun scattered golden ripples across the ocean's surface. The two of them walked along the beach, letting the soft sand swallow their footprints as they savored the quiet peace between them. When the last traces of light faded, the sea was left bathed in silver, and the sound of the waves became the only thing that filled the air. Above them, countless stars shimmered in the vast night sky, something you could never see in the city. I should go back and sleep now. Amber had been silent for a while, simply walking beside him. Ethan hadn't said much either. He was content just to share the silence. When she finally turned to face him and spoke, her voice was soft, almost reluctant. Ethan met her eyes and nodded slowly. He knew it was time for him to get busy again. Ever since arriving here, he had felt that elusive trace of draconic energy. It lingered in the air, faint, ethereal, like a dream you couldn't quite remember. He still wasn't sure if it truly belonged to a true dragon. After escorting Amber back to her room, Ethan quietly left the inn. Finding a secluded clearing, He summoned his personal combat mech, climbed inside, and soared into the night sky, heading west toward the interior of Sacred Sea Island. It didn't take long before he noticed something strange. To the west of the island, an area blazed with light. A platform had been erected there, and a crowd had gathered around it. The rest of Sacred Sea Island had no electricity, yet this single area glowed brightly against the dark ocean. Such an odd sight demanded investigation. Ethan lowered altitude and approached. Soon he reached the western coastline, and only then did he realize the light wasn't actually coming from the island itself. A long floating bridge, nearly 1,000 meters in length, stretched westward from the coast to a small cluster of rocks barely large enough to be called an island. At the bridge's entrance, more than 500 people had gathered, tourists, from the look of them. At the far end, on the rocky outcrop, stood several dozen figures radiating unusual energy. They wore matching uniforms, and the aura around them was unmistakable. Dissenter personnel. Among them, Ethan spotted Emery Shaw, now dressed in the same standard uniform. That alone confirmed his suspicion. These were remnants of the dissenter group. Scanning the crowd again, Ethan noticed Varric Stone among the tourists. The group was being held back by a line of security guards, waiting for something to begin. Varric was craning his neck, trying to see what was happening farther down the bridge. As Ethan observed, he picked up several distinct energy signatures within the crowd. When he focused on them, he realized they all belonged to people who were seriously ill. Could they all be here for the sacred blood ritual? He remembered the woman he'd met earlier mentioning that the ritual was said to cure incurable diseases. These people must have come here out of desperation, hoping for a miracle. Hovering about 20 meters above the crowd, Ethan stayed hidden in the darkness, watching closely to see what the so-called sacred blood ritual really was. So many people, someone grumbled from below. Yeah. Looks like bidding for a spot's going to be tough, said another. A thin, weary man clutching a worn briefcase tightly to his chest. His voice was weak, and there was a defeated tone to it. Clearly, he wasn't from a wealthy family, and whatever money he carried was probably everything he had. A few others nodded at his words. Around them, expressions shifted. Some people growing nervous, others starting to reconsider whether to stay. After all, with so many people and so few spots, the wealthy were bound to prevail. Winning a place in the ritual would take serious money. No one knew how high the bidding would go. And if they failed to secure a spot, the $100,000 entry fee would be nothing but a painful loss. It was all part of the dissenters' scheme. If they held the auction out in the open, who would bother buying those overpriced sightseeing tickets? Without ticket sales, no one would spread word of the supposedly miraculous sacred blood ritual, and fewer people would come seeking salvation. So these desperate souls had to pay just to qualify, unknowingly becoming walking advertisements for the dissenters. It was killing multiple birds with one stone. Ethan wasn't buying into any of it. He didn't believe in the so-called sacred blood ritual at all. The ones who won the ritual were probably dissenter plants, actors pretending to be miraculously healed. Who could say if they'd ever been sick in the first place? Just looking at the crowd of 500 people, Ethan could easily do the math. At $100,000 per ticket, that was $50 million in one round alone. Was there anything more profitable than this scam? This time there are only 500 or so, not that many. Last month, there were over 1,000. An old man in a wheelchair suddenly said, his voice cutting through the restless murmurs. People turned toward him, startled. The young man pushing his chair gave a calm smile. We came last month but didn't bring enough money. This time we're not leaving empty-handed. I'd advise the rest of you not to waste your ticket money. At that, several faces in the crowd darkened. Behind the young man stood 4 others, each holding 2 heavy briefcases, presumably stuffed with cash. The pilgrimage assembly demanded cash payments for both entry tickets and bidding, so almost everyone here carried at least one case of their own. We've got over 500 people this time and 5 spots available, someone muttered nearby, though his tone held little conviction. There's still a chance, maybe. He clutched 2 briefcases himself, but unlike most, his were filled with Central Euro currency instead of US dollars. He was betting that the old man's money was local, which might give him a better exchange advantage once the bidding began. Listening to them, Ethan's curiosity deepened. Could this pilgrimage assembly really be as miraculous as they claimed? The bridge gate remained closed, leaving the crowd to wait restlessly in the cool night air. But Ethan had no intention of standing around like the others. In a swift motion, he rose into the air and crossed the 1,000-meter stretch in seconds, descending silently above the rocky outcrop. The moment he arrived, something caught his attention. The rock's surface was unnaturally smooth, polished flat like a mirror, as though cut by a blade. Then he saw what was carved into it, and his eyes widened. An intricate 6-pointed star glowed faintly against the stone, its geometry so complex it almost hurt to look at. He realized why he hadn't noticed it earlier. When he had scanned the area with his soul sense, this pattern hadn't appeared at all. It must have been formed from some special material or concealed through powerful means, specifically designed to resist spiritual detection. But now, under his eyes, it was crystal clear. Chapter 621. The Extra Passenger. From his position high above, Ethan had a clear view of the rocky outcrop below. Nothing escaped his eyes. The dissenter personnel stationed there weren't particularly busy, they looked more like bored security guards than guards of some sacred ritual. But 6 of them stood out. Ethan's attention sharpened as he sensed strange fluctuations coming from their bodies. Draconic energy. That faint, almost imperceptible aura was the same dragon energy he'd been detecting all day. Each of the 6 wore a white robe that looked specially made. The fabric had some kind of property that completely blocked soul sense detection. When Ethan swept his awareness over them, it was like water hitting a raincoat. It slid right off. He let out a quiet chuckle. Heh! Materials like that exist? It was the first time he'd encountered something that could completely deflect his soul sense. The discovery was both surprising and intriguing. Then, as if waiting for some silent signal, the 6 figures moved. Each took a position at one of the 6 points of the star-shaped formation etched into the ground. The other dissenter members began moving as well, opening the gates at both ends of the floating bridge. The crowd waiting on the opposite side, those eager to take part in the so-called pilgrimage assembly, rushed forward the moment the path was clear. Of course, every one of them paid a fee to cross. Before long, over 500 people had stepped onto the rocky outcrop and were herded into the center of the 6-pointed star. There was no hesitation. The moment their feet touched the formation, the runes beneath them began to glow with a purple light. The 6 white-robed figures raised their hands and began a synchronized series of gestures, their fingers moving rapidly as they performed some kind of secret technique to activate the array. The ordinary participants simply stared at the runes beneath them, faces lit by the glow, their eyes filled with a mix of fear and awe. Everyone, stay calm. One of the dissenter guards called out. You all saw the hurricane and massive waves to the south earlier. The teleportation array is the only way to reach that area safely. The reassurance worked on some of the newcomers, though a few still looked uneasy. Others remained calm, clearly veterans of this event. They smirked at the frightened ones, conveniently forgetting they'd worn the same expression during their own first visit. Ethan, however, wasn't buying it. He remembered that woman on the ship saying almost the same thing. So, when he'd first arrived at Sacred Sea Island with Amber, he had quietly used his soul sense to scan the southern seas. There had been no hurricane, no massive waves, nothing at all. The entire spectacle was fake. Not an illusion exactly, but a long-term, 4-dimensional projection. A single floating buoy, equipped with a high-grade holographic projector, created the entire scene to deceive tourists. Visitors had marveled at what they believed were the wonders of nature, snapping pictures of the towering waterspout 10 miles away, never noticing that there was no wind or spray around them. They took photos on the calm shore, thinking themselves brave for standing so close to disaster. Now, as the glow from the 6-pointed star grew brighter, Ethan decided it was time. He shut down his mech's power systems and dropped silently from the air, landing directly on the rocky outcrop. The moment his boots touched the surface, the light from the array flared violently. Then, all at once, darkness swallowed everything. In the blink of an eye, the 500 people standing within the formation were gone. Ethan, hitching a ride among them, disappeared as well. For a moment, the outcrop was silent. Then one of the white-robed figures spoke, his voice low. How many this time? The man with the goatee, the same one Ethan had noticed earlier, answered promptly. 527, sir. Why do you ask? You're certain? The hooded figure's eyes gleamed from the shadow of his cowl. Absolutely. 527 people paid for tickets. Here's the registration. The goateed man stopped mid-sentence, his expression shifting. Wait. We sent off 528. A cold silence fell. Then, from among the white-robed figures, one spoke. His voice was low and distorted, like metal scraping against metal. 528? The words alone made the air feel heavier. Everyone froze. Emery Shaw's eyes flickered with alarm. He already knew who that extra person was. Who else could it be but Ethan? Go check. The lead white-robed figure barked. Find out which tourist is missing. Sir, Emery spoke quickly, cutting in before anyone could move. If someone was able to infiltrate this place without being noticed, they wouldn't have joined the tourists. I suggest notifying the masters on the other side instead. Let them handle it, identify and eliminate the intruder. That would be the safest approach. He kept his tone respectful, careful. He knew that if they actually started investigating, Ethan's absence would be discovered, and Amber, still on the island, would definitely be detained. Ethan might not have been a close friend, but they had history. And more importantly, the people backing Emery held Ethan in high regard. In truth, he and Ethan stood on the same side. Winning Ethan's trust was exactly what those people wanted. And if Emery managed to do that, the rewards would follow. The last time he completed one of their tasks, they'd given him a strange orb that enhanced his abilities, granting him the power to dissolve into mist. The experience had been terrifying and exhilarating all at once. If he could keep evolving, who knew what he might become? The other dissenter personnel, who had been about to act, stopped after hearing his suggestion. All eyes turned toward the lead white-robed figure. After a long moment, the man gave a slow nod. "We'll handle this matter. Return to your duties." With that, he and the other white-robed figures turned and drifted away into the shadows. Only when they were gone did the air finally feel breathable again. The dissenter guards exhaled in relief. The goateed squad leader walked up to Emery, clapping him on the shoulder with a crooked grin. "You're something else, kid. Just got here and already daring to talk back to those masters. You've got guts. I'll give you that. Last time, one of our brothers tried to argue with them and he was... well, let's just say it didn't end well. You're lucky. Judging by how fast they left, this is no small issue. Still, you saved us a lot of work tonight. Otherwise, we'd have been running around till morning. Come on, we're grabbing a drink." The tension broke instantly. The crew laughed, slapping shoulders and linking arms as they crossed the floating bridge back to Sacred Sea Island. Emery followed along, smiling faintly, though unease churned in his chest. Later that night, when the drinking was in full swing and everyone was half-conscious, someone finally told him what had happened to the brother the captain had mentioned. That man hadn't been punished. He'd been eaten, devoured alive by one of those white-robed figures. The revelation hit Emery like a bucket of ice water. The alcohol in his veins evaporated in an instant. If those drunk fools hadn't let it slip, he never would have known how close he'd come to death. His back was already soaked through, cold sweat clinging to his skin. He realized then that he hadn't escaped trouble tonight. He'd simply brushed past it. Chapter 622. Blood of the False Gods. Ethan felt a sudden lightness in his body as his feet landed on jagged rocks. A swirl of color flashed before his eyes, dizzying and brief. When his vision cleared, he realized he was standing in an unfamiliar place. Around him, people still looked disoriented, some even swaying slightly as they struggled to steady themselves. Ethan knew this was the lingering effect of teleportation. In that instant, he dismissed his combat mech and slipped into the crowd, blending in like any other traveler. "Huh!" A puzzled voice sounded beside him. Ethan turned and found himself staring into a familiar pair of eyes. "Brother! You!" It was Fatso, the chubby man with soul sense. He had recovered his senses faster than most, and naturally, he had noticed Ethan's sudden appearance. "What are you looking at? Who's your brother? Get lost." Ethan shot him a glare, his tone sharp and dismissive. By then, the others were beginning to come to their senses as well. Fatso rubbed his nose awkwardly but caught on immediately. Ethan clearly wanted to keep a low profile. There was no point in drawing attention here. Then came the sound. A deep, resonant roar tore through the air, so powerful it made the ground tremble. The very sky seemed to shudder as an overwhelming aura spread across the island. Ethan looked up, his expression tightening. Just as the woman had described, the island was completely surrounded by vast, churning waves, like a colossal waterspout that rose straight from the ocean, stretching endlessly between sea and sky. But what Ethan saw next nearly made his heart stop. This wasn't a dragon at all. It was a nest of WYRMS. He had never seen one before, yet his soul sense swept instinctively across the massive vortex, revealing their shapes. Enormous serpents coiled within the swirling waters, each bearing a single horn on its head. They perfectly matched the ancient legends, WYRMS, the forerunners of dragons. But there was something off about them. Each WYRM carried a faint draconic aura, subtle but unmistakable. Ethan frowned. Could WYRMS really evolve into dragons? The thought sounded absurd even in his own mind. He had once asked Dragon Child about it, and she had looked at him with pure disdain. "Do you think different species can just evolve into the same bloodline?" she had said. She never gave him a direct answer, but Ethan knew what she meant. WYRMS couldn't become dragons. So where did this draconic aura come from? Was Dragon Child mistaken because she wasn't from Earth? Could the evolutionary rules here be different? Could WYRMS on Earth truly transform into dragons? Before he could think further, the roar echoed again. The vortex at the top of the waterspout began to glow, shedding countless specks of crimson light that drifted downward like rain made of blood. Yet the droplets didn't fall to the ground. Instead, each one hovered in the air before the people below. "A drop of sacred blood for each of you," A hollow, echoing voice declared. A worthy reward for reaching this place. The crowd erupted in excitement. Many hurriedly pulled small glass vials from their robes and bags, collecting the glowing red drops with practiced ease. It seemed everyone had come prepared. Everyone except Fatso. He looked around, clearly flustered. He probably hadn't planned to come here at all. Maybe he just tagged along after hitting it big with Ethan at the casino. Brother, if you don't have a container, why don't you let me take that drop? Someone beside him offered with a grin. But before the man could finish his words, Fatso simply reached out, caught the hovering drop of sacred blood in his palm, and, under everyone's stunned gaze, stuck out his tongue and licked it clean. I paid 100,000 to get in here. Why would I hand it over to you? Fatso said, jutting his chin out defiantly. The man beside him sighed and gave him a helpless look. I've been watching you. You're not sick, so you're just wasting it. Once the sacred blood ritual ends, those who didn't win the bid will pay a fortune to get their hands on a drop like that. Forget 100,000, they'll pay 200,000 or 300,000 easily. Fatso froze, eyes widening in disbelief. Wait, you're serious? His face twisted in regret as he realized what he had just swallowed. So you're saying, I could come here every month and get rich? His expression shifted instantly, eyes practically glowing with dollar signs. Buddy, don't even dream about it, the man said, shaking his head. The second time you come, the entry fee is 10 times higher. And the third time, another 10 times after that. Fatso's jaw dropped. Ethan, standing nearby, couldn't help but feel a flicker of surprise. If people were coming back multiple times, that meant there were plenty of fools rich enough to keep paying, and plenty more being exploited. By the third visit, the price would be too absurd. He exhaled quietly. So many rich idiots in one place. With that thought, Ethan reached out and caught the drop of sacred blood, hovering before him. He brought it close to his nose and sniffed lightly. His brows drew together almost immediately. Something was wrong. A cold light flickered in his eyes as he flicked the drop from his hand, letting it splatter on the rocky ground. His gaze shifted toward the heart of the island, where a dark suspicion began to take root. Hey brother, don't just throw it away. Fatso's voice called out. You're wasting it worse than I did. Ethan turned toward him, irritation creeping into his tone. Do you even know what that is? Fatso blinked. What is it? Human blood, Ethan said flatly. And not just any human blood. It's corpse blood. Huh. This time Fatso didn't bother whispering. His voice came out loud and clear, drawing the attention of those nearby. He turned pale, gagging as he clutched his stomach and bent forward, looking ready to vomit. Hey, don't waste it, the man beside him shouted, jumping in alarm. Do you have any idea how valuable? Before Fatso could retch, the man grabbed his face, clapping a hand over his mouth and forcing his head back. Ethan watched, stunned, as Fatso's cheeks bulged. Despite his sharp soul sense, he clearly hadn't trained his body at all. Against the man's grip, he was helpless. Then came a loud gulp. Ugh. Hiss. A wave of disgust rippled through the crowd. Several people turned away, covering their mouths. A few women gasped and clutched their chests, struggling not to be sick themselves. The man who had forced Fatso to swallow patted his back with a grin. I know it's disgusting, but it's better than wasting it. If I hadn't been quick. He wiped his hands with a tissue, still speaking proudly, as if he had just done a favor. Fatso's face turned red with fury. The urge to strangle the man right there was almost irresistible. Before he could react, a shift in the atmosphere drew everyone's attention. A group of figures appeared in the distance, slowly approaching. All of them were dressed in flowing white robes that shimmered faintly in the dim light. Ethan narrowed his eyes. Even with his soul sense, he couldn't see through those robes. Whatever they were made of, it completely blocked any attempt to probe their true forms. He was certain of one thing though, beneath those robes were the WYRMS, taking on human shape. The robed figures didn't even glance in his direction. They moved in eerie unison, walking past the crowd and ascending a high stone platform that loomed ahead. An altar, ancient and solemn, radiating a strange and oppressive power. Chapter 623. The Pilgrimage's Hidden Depths. The white-robed figures who had appeared so suddenly ascended the altar and sat cross-legged in silence. Look, the pilgrimage is about to begin. Someone in the crowd shouted, voice brimming with excitement. No sooner had the words left his mouth than the roar came again. A surge of draconic energy rippled through the air, rolling off the altar like a living tide. Ethan felt it wash over him, dense, ancient and overwhelming, as it poured into the bodies of the people gathered below. The sudden intensity of the energy made him stiffen. Something inside him stirred in response, something he hadn't felt for a long time. The change came from the ancestral dragon's imperial aura he had inherited from Aldrich I. That power had been dormant for so long, suppressed and nearly devoured by the quintessence bone and the tree of life that coexisted within him. Ethan had almost forgotten it existed at all. Now it had awakened. Coiled deep within his core, it pulsed with renewed strength, far larger and more vivid than before. Ethan frowned, uncertain how it could have grown without him noticing. The aura trembled, and suddenly it began to thrash like a furious dragon trapped in a cage, its presence radiating rage and hostility. "What's going on?" Ethan muttered under his breath. It had never reacted like this before. The only thing that had changed was the draconic energy from the altar. Its surge must have triggered the outburst. He tried to communicate with the aura, but it ignored him entirely. It felt ancient, primal, and devoid of thought. Pure instinct and power, like a beast that refused to be tamed. "Wow! Do you guys feel that?" Someone exclaimed nearby. "I'm full of energy all of a sudden." Ethan glanced around. The frail man he had noticed earlier now looked completely transformed. His sickly complexion gone, his spine no longer hunched. "Yeah, I feel it too," another person shouted. "Haha, maybe I don't even need the sacred blood ritual anymore. My illness feels cured, and more than that." A middle-aged woman gazed down at the vial in her hand, eyes gleaming with desperation and hope. Without hesitation, she tilted her head back and drank the sacred blood she had collected earlier. "Ugh!" Fatso, standing nearby, grimaced and dry-heaved at the sight. Ethan barely noticed. His eyes remained locked on the altar, mind racing. The draconic energy flowing through the air was extraordinarily pure, so pure it made even the energy radiating from Dragonchild seem pale in comparison. This level of power could invigorate ordinary people with nothing more than its overflow. Could there truly be a powerful dragon sealed somewhere on this island? The thought unsettled him. He lifted his gaze to the altar, studying the faint shimmer of a barrier surrounding it. It was clearly some kind of magic array, designed to gather and contain the draconic energy, like a massive spirit-gathering formation. But where was the energy actually coming from? Ethan's instincts told him it wasn't from the figures on the altar. No, it was deeper, beneath the platform, or perhaps at the heart of the island itself. The WYRMS scattered around the place seemed to have grown by absorbing this energy, which explained the faint draconic aura that clung to their bodies. He didn't dare use his soul sense to confirm it, that would immediately draw attention. These WYRMS were far from weak. The lowest among them were netherrank experts. On Earth, that made them formidable. Even among the people Ethan had brought back from the Sea of Death, only a handful could stand against such power. Their strength had been suppressed by Earth's laws, but even so, they were dangerous. After watching quietly for a while, Ethan grew more certain of his conclusion. The energy's true source had to lie beneath the altar, or deep underground, somewhere within the island's sealed heart. His gaze drifted toward the towering waterspout encircling the island. It rose endlessly into the clouds, a barrier of water and wind that trapped everything inside. Their teleportation point was right at the edge of the island, cut off from any escape. Realizing this, Ethan quietly retreated toward the back of the crowd. "Shatterstar," he whispered. The air rippled faintly as a humanoid combat mech materialized beside him, cloaked in invisibility. Seizing the moment while no one was looking, Ethan took a step back. A soft hum of machinery filled his ears as the mech's energy field wrapped around him, and he vanished from sight. The crowd's eyes remained fixed on the altar, completely absorbed by the unfolding ceremony. No one noticed that Ethan had vanished. Inside the mech, safely concealed, Ethan no longer worried about being spotted. He guided Shatterstar backward, landing near the island's edge. From there, he could see that the enormous waterspout encircling the island didn't form a perfect seal, though the surging waves beyond it were fierce and unpredictable. Ethan didn't hesitate, controlling the mech with steady precision. He plunged into the sea, diving deep beneath the surface. The world above faded into silence as he descended into the cold, dark water. But just moments after Ethan disappeared below, another white-robed figure appeared on the altar. He carried something small in his hand, too distant for the onlookers to see clearly. Without a word, he approached the leader seated at the forefront and presented the object to him. If Ethan had been there, he would have recognized it instantly. A tiny snake, no more than 3 inches long. The creature lifted its head as it rested in the leader's palm, its tongue flicking rapidly. Hiss, hiss. The leader's eyes narrowed. "Humph. Find the missing one for me," he said coldly. He flicked his hand, and the other white-robed figures, who had been sitting cross-legged in the midst of the draconic baptism, rose at once. Without hesitation, they leapt down from the altar and began sweeping toward the gathered tourists. As they left, All the draconic energy that had been diffused across the altar abruptly converged on the lone remaining figure, the leader himself. The air around him shimmered, thick with power. It was as though the pilgrimage, once begun, could not be interrupted, and he refused to let even a trace of that sacred energy go to waste. The crowd exchanged confused glances. Their excitement turned to unease. What's happening? Why did they leave the altar? Someone whispered. Fatso's brow furrowed as a grim realization struck him. If anyone could have caused this sudden shift, it would be Ethan. But when he turned to look for him, Ethan was gone. A cold knot formed in Fatso's chest. Far away on Sacred Sea Island, the dissenters were deep in their drunken revelry. The air stank of liquor and arrogance. Emery Shaw, seated among them, had already extracted more information than he expected. At first, he learned something that nearly made his heart stop. He had narrowly escaped death himself. The news sobered him instantly, but he kept his composure, pretending to share in their careless laughter as he pressed for more details. Piece by piece, the truth emerged. The Renegade Alliance members captured by the dissenters during this recent campaign weren't being held here at all. They had been sent elsewhere, to the same mysterious place where Ethan had gone. Emery froze when he heard that. According to rumor, no one who entered that place ever came back alive. The only exceptions were those chosen to take part in the pilgrimage assembly, and even they rarely returned the same. Everyone else became sacrifices, fodder for the monsters that inhabited that forbidden site. Which meant the dissenters never intended to release their captives once their so-called deadline passed. They planned to wipe them all out. Emery's stomach tightened as he did the math. The number of captured Renegade Alliance members this time was staggering, over 3,000. This one operation had all but obliterated the Alliance's core strength in the northern frontier region. Worse still, even innocent bystanders, people who had merely bragged about being part of the Alliance, had been caught up and taken. The sudden disappearance of so many people couldn't go unnoticed. The authorities had mobilized across the entire Great Northeast, scouring every lead, yet no trace of the missing could be found. Days had passed, and still there was nothing. Finally, someone had sent an urgent report to the 9th Division, warning that the disappearances were not isolated. They had all happened almost simultaneously. Whatever was behind it was beyond anything ordinary. But the 9th Division could do little. It was a hollow shell now. Director Vaughn himself had vanished without a trace. And the last order he had given before disappearing had been the command to carry out those arrests. Chapter 624. The Sky Burns Red. Emery Shaw still remembered Director Vaughn's favorite saying, "Better to wrongly apprehend than to let one escape." It had sounded reasonable enough back then, but who could have predicted this? The highest authority in the 9th Division, the one in charge of dealing with paranormal cases, turned out to be the mastermind behind everything. After receiving the news, Emery pretended he needed to use the restroom and quietly slipped away. He wanted to find a way to reach Ethan. But with Ethan gone from the island, there was no way to contact him. They had exchanged phone numbers, but there was no signal here. His only option was to head toward Amber Zane's house. If anyone might have a way to reach Ethan, it would be her. Their relationship had become rather complicated. He was about 100 meters from her house when something flashed across the sea. A streak of white light sliced through the darkness, hovering high in the air. Emery narrowed his eyes. It wasn't a light at all, it was a person. Person who could fly. He froze, instinctively ducking behind cover. The figure paused briefly in midair, as if confirming their direction, then shot forward again like a meteor. A moment later, the light vanished, right in front of Amber Zane's house. Emery had seen it clearly. Whoever that was, they had entered her home. His stomach tightened. He could feel the malice from here. After a short hesitation, he reached up and pulled out his left eyeball. The orb was artificial, one of his custom devices. The moment he held it in his hand, his arm began to extend, stretching impossibly thin until it was little more than a black line reaching across the 100-meter gap. He pressed the artificial eye against Amber's window. Through his remaining eye, the scene came into focus. Amber Zane was suspended in the air, a hand gripping her throat. She struggled soundlessly, feet kicking at nothing. The man holding her was the same one Emery had just seen. Dressed in archaic clothing, straight out of another century. A dozen thoughts flashed through Emery's mind, but one thing was certain. He couldn't take that man head-on. He quietly detached the eye, leaving it by the open window. 8 mechanical legs unfolded from the orb, anchoring it in place. Then he drew his arm back, returning it to normal length, and reached inside his jacket. From the uniform of the dissenters, he pulled out a flare. Each member carried one, an emergency beacon to be used only under the most extreme circumstances. Gritting his teeth, he lit it. A sharp hiss filled the air, followed by a deafening boom. A blazing red symbol appeared high above the eastern coast. A single enormous word, enemy. The entire shoreline lit up under the crimson glare. Within seconds, shadows shot across the night sky toward him. Figures rushing in from the patrol units who hadn't gone drinking. More followed behind, dozens of them, slower but coming fast. "What's going on?" someone shouted as they approached. Seeing reinforcements arrive, Emery didn't waste time explaining. "Enemy attack!" he shouted, already sprinting toward Amber's house. The responders hesitated only for a heartbeat. The flare was forbidden to use except in dire emergencies. No one would trigger it unless the situation was critical. That was all they needed to know. They charged after him. Then, just as Emery reached the steps, boom! Amber Zane's room exploded. Out of the smoke and fire stepped a man, holding a woman by the hand. Everyone froze. Only now did they understand what Emery Shaw had meant by enemy attack. The aura radiating from the man before them was monstrous, dense, suffocating, and utterly inhuman. A bunch of small fry, daring to block this young lord? The man's voice was filled with disdain. He was Alaric, and his arrogance was enough to set the entire group of dissenters ablaze with fury. Within moments, those who had been drinking earlier came rushing over, forming a rough semicircle around him. "Shaw, what the hell happened to your eye?" a man with a goatee shouted, rushing forward. His tone carried both shock and confusion. Emery didn't answer right away. He wasn't this man's superior. He had only come because of a summons. He had arrived early, the others had yet to show. In truth, he didn't even know if they would show at all. "Damn it!" Emery snapped, his tone laced with pain. "I got ambushed while taking a piss. The bastard took out my eye." Dark fluid oozed from the empty socket, dripping down his cheek. The sight drew a collective gasp from those nearby, but none of them realized it was all an act. In the rubble behind Alaric, something small and round crept forward with the precision of a hunting spider. Emery's missing eye, supported by 8 slender mechanical legs, skittered silently over broken stone and ash. Its target was clear. Amber Zane, still gripped by Alaric's hand. "When did I—" Alaric began, but Emery cut him off, his leg whipping forward in a blur. His limbs stretched unnaturally, shooting out more than 10 meters in an instant. The sole of his boot aimed straight for Alaric's face. It wasn't meant to land. It was an insult, a taunt, meant to throw the man off balance. "You're asking for death." Alaric's fury came like a storm. He moved in a flash, his punch connecting with Emery's leg. The impact rang out with a deep thud. But instead of shattering, Emery's leg absorbed the blow, rippling like thick rubber before springing back. The strike did nothing. His body had long since evolved past normal human limits. Cut him, crush him, tear him apart, he'd only mold himself back together. The confrontation was the spark that set the night ablaze. Dozens of dissenters launched into action, their formation honed by countless missions. Close-quarters fighters lunged in first, while ranged specialists circled, ready to strike. Support units took positions behind them, weaving a tight net around Alaric. It should have been enough to overwhelm anyone. But this wasn't anyone. Boom! A deafening pulse erupted from Alaric's body. The shockwave hit like an invisible hammer, sweeping through the group. Men spat blood and flew through the air like rag dolls, their weapons scattering across the sand. They crashed into the ground with dull, wet thuds, unmoving. "A bunch of trash," Alaric sneered, his voice rising with cruel delight. "You dare lay hands on me? You all die." His aura surged again, thick and tangible, twisting the air around him. With a flick of his wrist, a weapon shimmered into existence. A slender rapier, drawn from the wide belt at his waist. It wasn't a conjured artifact like those of the mutants. It was real, forged, deadly. The sword bent slightly as he raised it, flexible as a whip. Its tip glowed, burning white, like a tiny star trapped at the end of the blade. Hidden at the edge of the fight, Emery didn't move. His artificial eye had crawled to Alaric's feet, giving him a perfect view. He could see every detail, the hidden sheath, the strange elasticity of the blade, the faint symbols carved along its surface. Then, Alaric flicked his wrist. The glowing point flashed, and a streak of light tore through the air toward Emery's position. Holy! Emery barely had time to react before the violent surge of energy roared straight at him. Chapter 625. The Depths Beneath Sacred Sea Island. Emery Shaw cursed under his breath. That man clearly had a grudge against him. There was no time to dodge. In an instant, Emery tucked in his arms and legs, even pulling his head into his torso. Within a heartbeat, he transformed into a perfect sphere. Boom! The impact shook the entire island like an earthquake had struck. Buildings rattled, waves surged against the shore, and the ground split open in cracks that spidered toward the coast. Tourists stumbled out of their rooms and crowded balconies, their terrified screams cutting through the roar. Chaos swept across the eastern side of Sacred Sea Island. When the dust finally cleared, a crater 5 or 6 meters deep and 20 meters wide scarred the ground. At its center, Emery Shaw was gone. The dissenters who had been fighting nearby froze, their faces twisted between fear and disbelief. Even the goateed man who led them took a cautious step back. That ancient-looking man was too powerful. He stared silently at the crater, eyes shadowed with something that looked almost like sorrow. A woo! A low, thunderous roar rolled across the island. Who dares cause trouble on Sacred Sea Island? Alaric had barely lifted his hand for another strike when the draconic howl shook the air. Wherever the sound spread, tourists collapsed one after another, dropping into a deep, dreamless sleep. Out of the air appeared 6 figures in white robes, the same 6 Ethan had glimpsed earlier. They surrounded Alaric in a tight formation. Relief flickered in the goateed man's eyes. These 6 were infamous for their strength. With them here, this nightmare should have been over. But Alaric only smiled faintly, as if he had expected their arrival. I sensed you long ago, he said. 6 mere beasts, and you think you can lecture me? His tone dripped with arrogance, his eyes cold and dismissive. Arrogant fool. One of the white-robed figures snarled. The air shuddered like grinding metal as the speaker lunged forward. The others followed an instant later, their robes flaring like wings. Boom! The collision was blinding. When the shockwave faded, the 6 figures staggered back several steps. Their faces were hidden beneath their hoods, but their trembling arms betrayed the strain. Alaric, by contrast, only flushed slightly before steadying himself. 6 wretches, he said with a mocking smile. I won't bother playing with you today. As soon as the words left his mouth, his body shot upward like a streak of light. Where do you think you're going? A woo! The 6 white-robed figures erupted in unison, their bodies swelling and contorting. In moments, they had become 6 colossal WYRMs, each over 100 meters long, scales flashing like ivory armor under the sunlight. The only mark that set them apart from ordinary serpents was the single horn crowning each of their heads. They rose into the sky and encircled Alaric, their roars echoing across the sea. Far offshore, something spherical burst from beneath the surface, skipping across the waves before settling to float quietly. After a few seconds, a head poked out. It was Emery Shaw. Alaric's attack had grazed him, but Emery had softened his body at the last moment and let the force fling him away instead of crushing him. The impact had hurled him deep underwater, slamming him dozens of meters down before his momentum ran out. Now, exhausted but alive, he drifted on the surface, bobbing gently with the tide. Meanwhile, Ethan knew nothing of the chaos above. Deep beneath the waves, he was still descending, following the jagged rock face of the seabed, unaware that Sacred Sea Island was on the brink of destruction. Ethan continued descending into the ocean's darkness. As he went deeper, he noticed something strange. The island's shape seemed to change. At first, it narrowed beneath the surface, but the farther he went, the more it expanded outward again. Then, around 1,000 meters down, it suddenly drew inward, as if the entire landmass were folding into itself. When Ethan finally reached nearly 9,000 meters below sea level, he froze in astonishment. The island wasn't resting on any seabed at all. It was floating, suspended in the water like a massive structure hanging in mid-ocean. Looking closer, he realized its shape resembled an inverted bottle. His brow furrowed. If it's a bottle, then there must be an opening. Driven by that thought, Ethan directed his mech toward the island's center beneath the sea. Down here, the pressure was enough to crush a human body to pulp, but the mech held steady, its reinforced shell groaning softly under the weight of the ocean. Its systems weren't perfect yet, it could barely provide propulsion and protection, but it was enough to keep him alive. He searched for a long time, scanning every inch of the island's underside. There was nothing, no entrance, no light, not even a hint of an opening. Doubt crept into his chest. Was I wrong? Is the island solid after all? Just as he was about to retreat, the ancestral dragon's imperial aura inside him suddenly erupted. It surged violently from his core, slipping from his control entirely. A golden yellow light blazed through the deep, cutting through the black water like a sunrise breaking the horizon. From his chest emerged a tiny dragon-shaped spirit, glowing brilliantly in the dark. Before Ethan could react, it flicked its tail and darted off into the distance. Damn it! Don't run! He shouted instinctively, surging after it. He had no idea where it was going, but he couldn't afford to lose it. That aura was something even his mother had treasured. If it truly possessed the power she hinted at, letting it escape would be an unforgivable mistake. Far above, Emery Shaw cautiously poked his head out from his spherical form, and immediately wished he hadn't. The island in the distance was chaos. 6 enormous WYRMs coiled and clashed in the sky, each movement shaking the heavens. The man in ancient robes was battling them alone, and every collision sounded like thunder splitting the world apart. Explosions tore through the air. One of the flying dragon ships anchored at the harbor was already wrecked, its hull split clean in half by a stray strike from a WIRM. It burned as it sank slowly into the waves. On the ground, panic spread like wildfire. The dissenters had broken formation, fleeing in every direction. The sheer scale of the battle was beyond anything they could comprehend. Many were caught in the crossfire, some crushed by falling debris, others swallowed by the shockwaves. The WIRMs showed no restraint. Their attacks slammed indiscriminately into the island, shaking cliffs and splitting open courtyards. Thankfully, the fight remained near the coast. Had it moved inland, the unconscious tourists lying within the island's resorts would already have been wiped out. The goateed man's face had gone pale. He barked orders over the chaos, telling his subordinates to pull back and rescue the wounded. But his mind was racing. If the WIRMs or that ancient warrior brought their battle closer to the island center, countless civilians would die before they even woke. For all their ruthlessness, the 9th Division still lived by one rule: protect the people. Whatever their methods, whatever their past mistakes, most of them had joined for that reason alone. "Captain!" A woman's trembling voice snapped him from his thoughts. She was staring past him, her face drained of color. The goateed man turned and froze. In her eyes was pure, unfiltered terror. Chapter 626. 7 stars. The goateed man froze, eyes widening as he turned toward the sea. A deep rumble rolled across the water. In the next instant, countless columns of water burst upward, towering hundreds of meters into the air. The number kept growing. The 2 massive flying dragon ships overhead rocked violently, their hulls groaning. Along the shore, smaller boats were already flipped over and sinking into the depths. "It's over," the goateed captain whispered, horror filling his eyes. Were those 6 beasts trying to drown Sacred Sea Island itself? Idiots! What kind of fight needs this kind of destruction? He spun around, shouting, "Run!" at the woman nearby. The countless columns of water had already begun twisting together, merging into a single monstrous vortex. It loomed like a colossal WIRM of the deep, coiling toward Alaric high above the island. The captain's position lay directly in its path. The swirling mass unleashed a massive suction, dragging everything toward it. He braced himself, but the pull was too strong. His boots scraped against the ground as his body slid helplessly toward the roaring maelstrom. "Go! Quickly!" A shout came from behind him, loud, desperate. He turned in shock. A huge black sphere came hurtling toward him, slamming into his body with bone-jarring force. Boom! The impact was soft yet immense, like being struck by a padded boulder. The blow sent him flying back toward the place where the woman had been screaming moments earlier. "Shaw!" he gasped. He recognized the voice instantly. And that shape, he'd seen Emery Shaw curl himself into a ball during the earlier battle. He'd assumed the man had died then. But no, he was still alive. Relief flickered in the captain's chest, but it vanished in the next heartbeat. When the black sphere struck him, the recoil flung Emery Shaw straight into the heart of the vortex. The captain landed hard, rolling across the wet ground. He looked up, despair flooding through him. Shaw was gone, swallowed by the churning water. Was there any chance of survival? "Don't stand there shouting. Run. If you want to save me, collect my body fragments when this is over." The voice was faint but unmistakable. The goateed captain stared at his arm, stunned. A thin puddle of black liquid clung to his wrist, gelatinous and shifting. "Brother!" he breathed, his heart lifting. He could sense Emery Shaw's presence in that strange fluid. Those words meant only one thing: Shaw had a way to survive this. Clenching his jaw, the captain turned and sprinted toward the heart of the island. As he tore through the residential quarter, he grabbed 2 civilians who were frozen in panic, dragging them along. Around him, his men were rushing in and out of buildings, hauling people to safety. By now, most of the inhabitants had been moved inland. Far above them, Alaric hovered in the sky, staring down at the enormous vortex with an uncharacteristic flicker of shock. The attack was a combined spell, unleashed by those 6 defiant creatures. "Humph, to push me this far. You've done well, 7 stars. The rapier that had vanished earlier reappeared, gleaming coldly in the stormlight. Throughout the battle, Alaric had fought with Amber Zane tucked under his arm, wielding only one hand. Even so, he had held his ground against 6 WIRMs. Now, as the monstrous vortex surged closer, he whispered the words, 7 stars, and moved. He swung the rapier through the air, his feet gliding in an intricate rhythm that looked almost like a dance. Clink, clink, clink. 7 sharp notes rang out, pure and metallic. 7 streaks of light shot into the sky, forming the shape of the Big Dipper. The constellation flared brilliantly, then shot downward, striking the massive waterspout head-on. Below, the 6 WYRMS, having spent their strength to summon the vortex, shifted back into their human forms. Their white robes were marred with dark crimson. Blood trickled from their lips, staining their pale garments. They had fought fiercely, but they were wounded, every one of them. Pain coursed through their bodies with every breath. The 6 WYRMS, now in human form, stared up at Alaric suspended in the sky, their faces pale with disbelief. Who was this man? His aura was similar to theirs, and yet from the very first exchange, they'd realized he stood far above them. Even when they had surrounded him in their true forms, every strike they unleashed, each one meant to kill, had been deflected with ease. He had fought them all using only one hand. Not once had he attacked directly. His defense alone had felt like an assault, every parry sharp and precise, forcing them back and leaving them bloodied. If not for the natural resilience of their draconic bodies, they would have been dead long ago. He hadn't even fought seriously, and still he overwhelmed them completely. They weren't weak among their kind. Each had honed their strength through years of cultivation, their draconic energy elevating them beyond ordinary WYRMs. And yet this single man, calm and composed, had subdued 6 of them at once. Who was he? That question barely formed before the Big Dipper that Alaric had summoned collided with the massive waterspout the 6 had created together. The contrast was absurd. A tiny constellation of light against a vortex 1,000 meters tall, hundreds of meters thick. There should have been no contest. But the instant they touched, a faint sound cut through the roar of the sea. Hiss! The Big Dipper pierced straight through the towering waterspout. None of the 6 cheered. Instead, their hearts sank. The vortex stopped moving. Crack, crack, crack. A sharp, crystalline sound echoed as ice spread through the entire column. The waterspout solidified in seconds, transforming from raging water into transparent crystal. Then came the explosion. Boom! The frozen tower shattered and collapsed, breaking apart into 1,000 fragments. The impact sent waves surging outward, crashing into the eastern coast of Sacred Sea Island. The ground trembled violently, as though the island itself were trying to shake free of the sea. Buildings crumbled. Towers and docks disappeared beneath the raging water. Within moments, the entire eastern shoreline, once lined with shining resorts and grand halls, was gone. It looked as if the end of the world had passed through. From the central district of the island, the dissenters could only watch in stunned silence. The earth still trembled beneath their feet. "We've been called monsters before," someone whispered, his voice hoarse. "But—" He trailed off, unable to finish. The goateed captain, his expression grim, finished the sentence for him. "Compared to them, we're nothing." No one disagreed. Heads bowed in silent acknowledgement. High above, the 6 white-robed figures, the WYRMS, had withdrawn 1,000 meters, warily keeping their distance from the man in the sky. "Who exactly are you?" one of them finally demanded, his voice strained. Alaric looked down at them, his expression unreadable. "Me?" He gave a short, disdainful laugh. "You insects aren't worthy of knowing my name. But—" He paused, the faintest smirk tugging at his lips. His eyes glowed faintly, sharp as blades. In that moment, he seemed less like a man and more like a sovereign, an ancient god surveying the mortal world beneath him. "I have business elsewhere. I won't waste any more time here. Listen carefully." Chapter 627. The Immortal Sea. The 6 white-robed figures, transformed from WYRMS, were clearly enraged by his arrogance. One of them started forward, but another reached out and stopped him with a silent shake of the head. Then Alaric's voice rang out again, calm yet mocking. "From the high platform, gaze upon the eastern sea, where the dome of the immortal mountains lies hidden. Within the island, where the cosmos is vast and void, seek the path and shatter the primordial chaos." "Ha ha ha! You beasts, I'll remember this. Once I'm done, I'll pay a visit to Cosmos Isle and have some fun with you." He finished his 4 lines of doggerel and burst into laughter. Bold, reckless, and disdainful. Yet it was those very words that made the 6 WYRMS tremble with barely contained fury at being called beasts. And when they heard the name Cosmos Isle, a visible shudder ran through their bodies. Cosmos Isle was where Ethan and his group had gone. It was the WYRM tribe's nest. Far away, atop the peak of Sacred Sea Island, the goateed captain overheard Alaric's voice echoing across the sea. His body stiffened. "Ascension Isle? Someone from the Seridan family?" He muttered, his tone edged with disbelief. In an instant, the gravity of the situation sank in. He lifted his arm and looked down at the slimy mass that was Emery Shaw, now half liquefied and clinging to his sleeve. A wry smile crossed his face. "This kid really has the worst luck." He only stepped away to take a piss. And somehow managed to offend a powerhouse like that. Captain, who exactly are the Cerridon family of Ascension Isle? One of the men asked, curiosity overcoming caution. The goateed man shot him a sharp glance. Don't ask. Don't even try. For your own good. That was enough to silence them. Though their eyes flickered with intrigue, none of them dared to question further after that warning. Once the others dispersed, the captain moved to a quieter spot at the edge of the ridge. He lowered his voice and spoke to the viscous remnants of Emery Shaw. Brother Shaw, that woman Alaric took? Who was she? Amber Zane, Emery answered weakly but without hesitation. From the Zane family. The Zane family? Amber Zane. The captain frowned. You mean that Zane family? The one running the casino in partnership with us? Emery gave a faint chuckle. You're wondering why he'd kidnap an official from a declining house in the mundane world, aren't you? The captain nodded. That was exactly what he'd been thinking. The Zane family may have fallen, but don't forget, they're still one of the noble 8 lineages, Emery said slowly, his voice steadying. On the surface, Amber's just managing the family's business ventures. But according to what I've heard, she's already been chosen as their next clan leader. The captain's expression hardened at once. He understood. The Zane family might have lost influence over the years, but they were still part of the 8 lineages, and that title carried weight. The noble 8 lineages had once ruled their world. Their history stretched back hundreds of years, filled with rivalry and blood feuds among themselves. Yet no matter how fierce their internal battles grew, they always stood united when threatened by outsiders. It was an unspoken rule. We can fight each other, but if someone from outside lays a hand on one of us, we'll bury them together. In recent years, the 8 lineages had grown quiet, fading from the public eye. No grand displays of power, no legendary figures rising from their ranks. People began to forget their name, to believe the stories were exaggerated myths. But those who truly knew understood. The fangs of the 8 lineages had only been hidden, not lost. It seems this is turning out to be more complicated than I thought, the goateed man murmured. Emery gave a faint, weary smile. Interesting, isn't it? Ah. The goateed man was momentarily speechless, his expression twisting into something caught between confusion and disbelief. All right, little lamb, stop pretending, Emery Shaw said dryly. It's just the 2 of us here. Hurry up and help me find the rest of my body fragments. You can't tell me you enjoy having 2 sweaty men stuck together like this. The goateed man, Noah, kept walking, putting distance between them and the others until they reached a quiet stretch of beach. He froze mid-step when Emery called him that name. Call me that again and I'll toss this lump of you straight into the ocean. Noah growled, his beard bristling. Oh, Noah, don't kid yourself. You wouldn't dare. Emery shot back. If I hadn't saved you, do you really think I'd be in this state right now? I didn't ask you to save me, Noah muttered, his chin jutting forward stubbornly, beard quivering. All right, you didn't ask. I volunteered, Emery said with mock patience. But really, last time I lost an eyeball. Who knows what part I'll lose this time? Noah sighed. Fine, stop bringing up the past. I'll help you find your body first. Happy? He quickened his pace toward the waterline, his tone gruff but his steps urgent. He didn't say it aloud, but in his mind, the debt lingered. Emery had saved him once before, 30 years ago. Hurry up already. Your sheepy smell's making me nauseous. Emery shouted after him, his voice echoing faintly across the rocks. As Noah crouched near the sand, a thought struck him. By the way, he said, glancing at his arm where Emery's goose still clung. Did anyone sneak into the teleportation array earlier? You seemed a little too eager to stop people from checking. Emery was quiet for a moment. Then, with deliberate irony, he said, Don't ask, don't inquire. It's for your own good. Noah's beard twitched 3 times in frustration. Damn it, he muttered. Far beneath Cosmos Isle, the sea was black and endless. Ethan surged through the depths, chasing the flickering trail of the ancestral dragon's imperial aura. The golden glow ahead darted like a living comet, moving faster than he could hope to catch. For several long minutes, he pushed himself to keep up, lungs burning, mind racing. Then, just as he began to despair, the small golden figure suddenly twisted mid-swim, flicked its tail and shot upward, vanishing into the darkness above. Ethan froze. His heart pounded. Where did you go? He swam closer to where it had disappeared and spotted a narrow, finger-sized hole in the coral-covered stone. A faint golden light spilled from within. He leaned in, squinting. Inside, the little golden dragon peeked out, its tiny head cocked to one side. When it spotted him, it lifted a claw and beckoned, as if urging him to follow. Ethan blinked. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered. But when he didn't move, The little dragon frowned. Actually frowned. Then gestured more insistently, pointing back into the hole as if to say, "Come on, what are you waiting for?" Ethan rubbed his temples in exasperation. "That hole's the size of my finger, genius. How exactly do you expect me to fit through that?" Before he could finish grumbling, the dragon zipped out in a streak of gold. With surprising strength, it latched onto his finger with its two tiny claws and started tugging, babbling a string of high-pitched noises that almost sounded like, "I'll help you get in." Ethan nearly laughed from sheer disbelief. He flicked his hand, gently dislodging it. "Yeah, that's not happening," he muttered, half amused, half irritated. Then he turned his attention to the rock wall, running his hands along its surface. There had to be something more, a hidden mechanism, a concealed entrance. That hole. It couldn't just be a hole. A suspicion crept into his mind. Could this be the entrance to the bottle? He pressed closer, feeling the faint hum of energy emanating from within the stone. The golden light pulsed once, almost like a heartbeat. And then the rock trembled. Chapter 628. The bottle's inverted heart. Ethan stared at the opening. This can't be a normal entrance, he thought. The bottle-shaped aisle was enormous, stretching from the ocean surface down nearly 9,000 meters. If he could somehow haul the entire thing up, it might even tower over Mount Everest. He ran his hands along the rocky surface, tracing every groove and ridge, searching for any hidden mechanism or sign of life. After a long while, he found nothing. Just as he was about to return to the small opening and probe it with his sole sense, something unusual appeared. A fish, drifting into view. Ethan froze. The creature was hideous, almost grotesquely so, with a body that seemed patched together by nature's mistakes. Then, from the very opening the little golden dragon had discovered, came a sudden gurgling sound. A bubble shot out, not lazily floating upward, but blasting forward as if launched by pressure. It grew rapidly, swelling to dozens of meters across in an instant, completely engulfing the monstrous fish. Ethan gawked, startled by the sight. Before he could react, the bubble reversed direction and sped back toward the bottle. As it moved, it shrank, compressing from something massive to the size of a thumb before vanishing into the opening. Yet the fish inside wasn't crushed. Instead, it shrunk right along with the bubble and disappeared into the bottle as if it had been swallowed whole. "What the? Is this thing alive? Does it hunt fish?" Ethan muttered in disbelief. His eyes narrowed as an idea took shape. He cast his soul sense outward and soon detected two more large fish nearby. Swiftly, he maneuvered his mech suit, catching one and dragging it back toward the strange opening. Sure enough, as soon as he approached, the bottle spat out another bubble. It wrapped around both Ethan and the struggling fish. His pulse quickened. This had to be the way in. But as the bubble began to shrink, he realized something was wrong. It passed right through his body, ejecting him while only drawing the fish back into the bottle. "Son of a..." Ethan cursed. "You picky bottle." He floated there, fuming. If he couldn't get in this way, then what was he supposed to do? After a brief pause, a reckless idea struck him. He caught another fish. The moment the bubble emerged again, Ethan pried open the creature's grotesque mouth and slipped inside. Thankfully, his mech suit shielded him. Otherwise, the thought alone would have turned his stomach. As the bubble drew them in, Ethan extended his soul sense and felt his own body begin to shrink. This time, it was working. He drifted forward, weightless, toward the opening. Then came a soft pop. The bubble burst, and Ethan knew he had entered. He immediately punched at the fish's mouth. The ugly creature convulsed and spat him out. As Ethan stumbled free, he spotted the little golden dragon peeking from a small crack in the distance. When it recognized him, it wagged its tail with excitement and darted over, circling him happily. Ethan took a moment to orient himself. His body had returned to its normal size, though the transition had left his senses buzzing. Around him, 3 fish flitted about nervously, startled by his sudden arrival. It seemed the creatures the bottle captured weren't killed, just stored here. "Iya-ya!" The little golden dragon fluttered before him, its translucent form made from the ancestral dragon's imperial aura. It waved its tiny claws and chirped urgently, pointing deeper into the bottle. Ethan tried communicating with it through soul sense, but the creature didn't respond at all. He sighed. The little thing clearly didn't understand him. Still, he had come this far. Whatever lay deeper inside, he needed to see it for himself. Ignoring the dragon's fussing, Ethan gathered himself and started forward. He gently pushed the little golden dragon aside and swam deeper. It struck him that he had been underwater for more than 2 hours since leaving the surface. Without his personal combat mech, he would have long since run out of air. He still hadn't tested whether his druid's travel form, specifically, the seal form, could let him breathe underwater in the real world. Fortunately, His mech was powerful enough to extract oxygen from the seawater and keep him alive down here. The little golden dragon led the way, glowing brilliantly in the dark. Its light shone even brighter than the mech's floodlamps, casting rippling golden patterns across the cavern walls. Kept pointing forward, urging him on. Ethan frowned. If this was really a bottle and he was moving toward its base, then shouldn't that mean he was actually going upward? Yet gravity still pulled him down. It felt as if the bottle wasn't standing upright at all, but lying on its side. The farther he went, the narrower the passage became. Soon he was certain. He had reached the middle section, and the bottle was indeed positioned horizontally. But that didn't make sense. Outside, it had appeared perfectly vertical. Was the space inside disconnected from the external world, existing under its own strange laws? At the narrowest point, the seawater ended abruptly. A faint, translucent membrane shimmered before him, separating the water from a dry chamber beyond. Ethan hesitated for a moment, then pressed forward. The instant he crossed the barrier, everything shifted. The pull of gravity flipped, and his body dropped like a stone. He twisted in midair, glancing upward. What had been the tunnel behind him now hung above, the water glimmering at its mouth like a suspended pool. Somehow, by entering this inner chamber, his orientation had changed completely. His mech's thrusters flared, catching him before he hit the ground. The little golden dragon wasn't so lucky. It tumbled helplessly through the air until Ethan grabbed it by the tail and steadied it. The creature blinked several times, dazed, before finding its balance again. "Iya-ya!" It chirped suddenly, its eyes lighting up, pointed downward and shot off before Ethan could stop it. "Hey, wait!" Ethan lunged forward, snatching the reckless creature out of the air. If it ran into danger, he wouldn't have time to react. Below them stood a structure that looked like an altar, eerily similar to the one on the island above. At its center rested a massive, spherical object glowing with a dim, sinister light. Heavy chains bound it in place, forming a cage that imprisoned the egg-shaped orb. Ethan held the struggling golden dragon close as it thrashed and nipped at his fingers. Its eyes locked greedily on the orb. Drool almost hung from its mouth. "You want to eat it?" he asked, half incredulous. The dragon froze at his words, then nodded eagerly, pointing again toward the orb. Ethan hesitated. He could feel the energy radiating from the thing, an aura that echoed the dragon child and the golden dragon itself. Yet beneath it lurked something darker, twisted and malevolent. He floated there, eyes narrowed, studying the chained egg as the dim light pulsed like a heartbeat. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a relic or a treasure. Something alive was sealed inside. Chapter 629. The Dragon in the Egg. Ethan peered into the murky depths of the giant egg. Inside, a vague silhouette shifted within the gloom. He had already encountered two dragons. The dragon child, who embodied the blue dragon, and the little golden dragon, born from the ancestral dragon's imperial aura. Yet what he saw now was something altogether different. Whatever slumbered in that egg did not look like any dragon he knew. The creature's body was immense and elongated, its eyes glowing black and yellow in the half-light. 3 horns jutted from its head, and, strangely, not a single scale covered its body. It was serpentine but not quite a serpent, closer perhaps to a monstrous mudfish than a WRM. Beneath its belly, 5 limbs flexed faintly, each ending in clawed digits. That detail caught Ethan's eye. The little golden dragon in his palm also had 5 legs. The dragon child, in her true form, had only 4. It made him wonder. The little golden dragon, formed from the ancestral dragon's aura, seemed to hold a higher status than the dragon child. Though Ethan couldn't say for certain. Was this mudfish-like being another step above them, or something aberrant entirely? Legends spoke of 5-clawed golden dragons as kings of their kind, but those were just tales. There were also stories of WRMS transforming into dragons after surviving countless trials, though the dragon child herself had dismissed that as nonsense. Still, this strange creature, too, bore 5 claws. Ethan's mind spun with questions. What was it, truly? Then the thing inside the egg stirred. It opened its mouth, and a deep, resonant roar rolled out. "Oh, woo." Sound that seemed to reverberate straight through Ethan's soul. His whole body trembled inside the mech suit. The roar carried genuine draconic might, the same kind of oppressive power he had felt from his own blue dragon's aura. Damn, it really is a dragon, but its aura feels confused. Could it be some kind of hybrid? He muttered, his expression tightening as he drifted closer. "You human ant, how dare you insult this venerable one?" The voice cut through the water, rough, old, and unmistakably speaking in human tongue. Before Ethan could react, the creature flicked its head, and several long whiskers, like the tendrils of a catfish, shot outward. The tough membrane of the egg split with a shriek that felt like space itself tearing. A surge of alarm jolted Ethan into motion. He darted aside just as one of the whiskers lashed past, slicing the water where he had floated a heartbeat ago. The tendril stretched far beyond the egg, writhing upward through the water curtain above. When it pulled back, it dragged with it 3 wriggling fish, one of which was the same kind of strange fish Ethan had ridden in on. In an instant, all 3 were swallowed into the egg's depths. 3 of them. It's been far too long since this venerable one's had a proper feast. How curious. How did a human insect like you get in here? Humph. No matter. I'll spare you for now. You can't escape anyway. Once I've eaten, we'll talk. The monstrous dragon catfish lowered its head and began to chew. The crunching echoed through the water, deep and unsettling. Only then did Ethan realize that it hadn't actually been attacking him earlier. The creature had merely been feeding itself, using those whiskers to draw in prey. The bottle, it seemed, was designed to catch fish from outside and deliver them directly to it. Iya. A soft cry broke through Ethan's thoughts. He turned the mech's head and saw the little golden dragon huddled behind him, its bright eyes wide with both excitement and fear. It trembled as it peeked at the egg, tiny claws gripping Ethan's shoulder armor. Whatever was inside terrified it, but at the same time it seemed drawn to it. Iya, it chirped again, waving its 2 front paws with a kind of impatient insistence. Ethan frowned, then realized what it was trying to say. It wanted him to go over there, to fight that thing. That human, what's behind you? Why does it smell of it? The voice rumbled from within the egg, low and distorted, vibrating through the water. The creature's glowing eyes narrowed, fixing on Ethan. You mean this? Ethan reached behind his neck and carefully pulled out the little golden dragon. Iya. The tiny dragon squealed, struggling frantically in his grip, its fear almost palpable. The monstrous creature's pupils contracted. Ancestral dragon. Hatchling? Its voice rose sharply, and it slammed its massive head against the edge of the egg. The whole shell shuddered, but it didn't crack. The beast reeled from the rebound, its breathing ragged, yet laughter burst from its throat. Ha ha ha. Good. Good. The wheel of time turns, and retribution comes quickly. Ancestral dragon, you never thought it would end like this, did you? And so weak. Come. Let this venerable one devour your essence and erase you completely. With a hiss, one of its long whiskers lashed out, slicing through the water toward Ethan. Get lost. Ethan snapped, pulling back his mech's arm. The thrusters roared to life and he threw a punch. Boom! The impact shook the water around them. The force hurled Ethan backward, his mech stabilizers flaring as he regained balance. Across from him, the creature's whisker recoiled violently, and a hiss of pain echoed through the chamber. Human ant! How dare you wound this venerable one? Its colossal body thrashed in fury, chains clattering around it. Ethan flexed his arm inside the suit, his hand numb from the shock. But his eyes lit up. That hit actually hurt it. It's not that strong. A grin tugged at his lips. Don't start bragging, mudfish. Forget this venerable one nonsense. You're just a glorified catfish in a cage. I can knock you around whenever I want. So go on. Tough guy. Come out of that shell and let's go some rounds. Ethan's tone was deliberately mocking, almost cheerful. He had already noticed that the creature couldn't leave its prison. The altar and the cage were one structure, bound together in a formation that siphoned the creature's draconic aura whenever it moved. Even when still, traces of its power were constantly being drained into the altar beneath. That last outburst had cost it dearly when it slammed its head. A surge of aura had flared up, only to be instantly absorbed. No wonder the island's altar now stood deserted. If anyone had still been performing rituals here, they would have noticed something was wrong long ago. The WIRMS who once came to this place to worship were in fact growing by feeding on the dragon's stolen essence. The altar's design ensured that none of that power was wasted. It harvested every drop, storing it for the next generation of supplicants to draw from. This so-called pilgrimage was nothing more than an elaborate form of parasitism. The monstrous dragon knew all of this. It had endured endless years trapped in that prison. Its strength continuously leached away. It also knew that every time it struggled, the cage drank deeper of its essence. Yet the human's words, so insolent, so casually disrespectful, made its blood boil. Little ant, I am the ancestor of the dragon clan. How dare you speak so to me? In ages past, I would have crushed you into dust. Its voice shook with fury, but it did not move again. It didn't dare. The outburst had already cost it half of the essence it had spent centuries recovering. Ethan smirked. Oh really? The ancestor of the dragon clan? Huh? Then what's this little guy supposed to be? He held up the tiny golden dragon by its tail, letting it dangle in front of him. The little creature wriggled and chirped in protest, its golden scales glinting faintly in the dim light. Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.